Well, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute after the show today.
Absolutely.
So, before we get into your world of being a trainer, I want to know this. 5 years ago, this pandemic was changing probably training in every single aspect of company life and corporate life. How did you make it through that era, and how has it changed the way that you approach things in 2025?
Well, it was an interesting period, I think, to just watch not just my own reaction, but how other people were reacting. And I think it's actually very indicative of how people are with challenging situations. So I saw some people, and not to minimize, because I know a lot of people lost loved ones and lost so much in the pandemic. But that aside for a moment, I think just the sheer panic or the way of coping with things, I think we can learn so much from that. So my background is in mental health. I'm a psychologist, and at the time, I was doing therapy. I have a private practice in San Francisco, and people were coming into my office. And as soon as the pandemic started, then I went working from home and was doing all of my sessions virtually. And I couldn't help but notice how people were reacting. So there was a lot of panic, a lot of like feeling claustrophobic, feeling trapped, a lot of that kind of sentiment. And it required a lot of reframing, which is what I was helping my clients with at the time. Um, and personally, what I found is for me, it was a real opportunity to change things up. And so I really approached the pandemic as, how can we make the most of this situation? So my kids were studying from home. They were little at the time, and it was for sure challenging to be working from home and then dealing with kids and all that kind of stuff. So people are aware of that. We got to the summertime and couldn't put the kids in any sort of camp in San Francisco. My dad happened to have a house in Fort Lauderdale and he was stuck out of the country. So he offered us to come and stay. And he had a pool. And the idea was kids can't go to camp, but they can at least splash around. And you guys are going to work from home anyway. So we up and went to Florida for this summer of 2020. And it was actually like an amazing, fun thing while everybody else was unfortunately like really struggling. I felt like I was on vacation because I was, working, I was living East Coast hours, working West Coast hours, so I could just kind of take my time in the morning. We'd go swimming, we'd like take our time showering and making tea and having breakfast, and then jump in at like 11 in the morning to start work.
Yeah.
And then every weekend was like going to different beaches and just like exploring. And so it was like definitely like feeling like a vacation in some ways.
Yeah.
And at some point in that, given the fact that we got a phone call from the school that said we're actually not going back. We're going to stay virtual. And so I said to my husband, well, why are we in such a rush to get back to San Francisco? So we ended up staying we're like, we'll just stay until we want to go back. And one day, about 3 months in, I said to him, hey, what do you think about moving here? And he's like, you're not going to believe this, but I was just thinking the same thing. Right. And so this whole kind of exploration for just something to do over the summer turned into a whole lifestyle change
Wow.
where, we made this COVID move. We moved out here and everything changed. Like I went from doing therapy to doing executive coaching. I just like my lifestyle, everything has
Yep.
become completely different as a result of that. And so I really look at that period as, when you're in a change, something that's different, how do you handle it? What is that inner dialogue? What are you saying to yourself? Because that's going to very much affect how you feel and the kinds of decisions that you make, the different things that you end up doing as a result. So we really have, and that's really like what I was doing as a therapist with my clients is helping them figure this stuff out, right? Because I find that the reason there's so much suffering out there is because of the messaging that is happening between our ears.
Yeah.
And so for me, this was a real opportunity to kind of live that
Mhm.
and to see how my own brain works and what I do with it.
Seems like being in therapy lends well to what you're doing. I mean, that's really what it is. The name of the game is kind of rewiring the brain to find the right path, to find what makes sense.
That's a really big part of it. So in actually pre-pandemic in 2018, I started writing a book on burnout, and it was at a time when there was very little on the subject. And it took me 2 years because I was doing it kind of on the side, researching, interviewing people, figuring out like what is this thing that I'd never even heard of before. And I was about to hit publish on the book in March of 2020. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, nobody needs this book now because everyone's going home. And it was really for the person that's working out of a job, right? And dealing with all the stress and everything. So I didn't publish it. And then 6 months into the pandemic, that's all you heard people talk about is burnout. And so I finally published it mid-pandemic. And it's amazing like how everybody became a burnout expert like overnight.
Uh-huh.
There
Yeah.
were so many books on it. Like that's become such a hot topic to the point where when I started doing keynote speaking, I would hear this is about 2022, about a couple years after the pandemic, people were saying, I am so sick of people talking about burnout
Yeah.
because that's all people were talking about. So it was like a real evolution.
People were getting burned out on burning out,
Exactly,
you know?
exactly.
So let's put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds right now. You're in a
Okay.
school, it's career day, and the kid in the back of the room wants to know what you do for a living. How do you explain it?
And it's funny that you asked that because it's not even like a hard thing to explain to a 12-year-old. It's a
Yeah.
hard thing for me to explain in general because I feel like as an entrepreneur, we do so many things
Yeah.
um, that it's kind of hard. But I will say that if I had to boil it down, I would say I am really focused on transformation. So before, when I'm focusing on like executives and helping them recover from burnout, it's like that sort of transformation is like, how do we get you out of this burnout state, right? How do we bring you back to where you were before and even go beyond that so that you don't end up back here over and over again? There's something to be learned from this experience. Let's take that and give you the skills and the know-how so that you don't end up here again. Um, and then really I wanted to have a bigger impact. And so then I really thought about like what leads people to burn out. And some of it actually comes from the culture within which they work. So if we work with the individual and then we put them right back into that environment,
Yeah.
it's a struggle. And so I really want to have a bigger impact by doing cultural transformations. And that's where the consulting kind of came in. So I would say um, the actual work is transforming individuals and organizations so that people can enjoy the work that they're doing without burning out. And the way in which I do it is, varies. So it's through writing books, it's through speaking, it's through consulting, but ultimately that's the work that I do. And I don't know if that's like a 12-year-old level.
They might get it. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
but
they're around people that they obviously have seen in their lives that probably aren't happy with what they're doing or overworked or whatever.
absolutely. And
And
and actually when I think back to when I was even younger than 12, probably 6 or so, I remember sitting around the table with all of the adults in my family and hearing them talk about work and
yeah.
how there was this sentiment of feeling the sense of resentment or just like, oh, I gotta go to work.
Uh-huh.
And I just remember that really stuck with me. And I decided at some point in really early days that I was gonna find something that I'm passionate about. I did not want to waste every waking day dreading work because that's where we spend more time than anywhere else.
Yeah.
So it was really about the pursuit of my passion, something that I can get excited about, that will help me get out of bed and I could look forward to.
So let's say you're in that room at 12 years old, it's career day. What are you thinking in your head is going to be a dream job for you?
If I'm the speaker or the
No,
12?
you're a kid. You're 12 years old, and you
Yeah.
obviously want to have something that's not going to make you dread Monday. But did you have a specific job in mind that you wanted to do?
So I'm glad you asked that. So actually, I remember being in like elementary school, and we would play the game MASH, if you remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And one of the questions was, what are you gonna do? What do you want to be when you grow up? And the responses were always a doctor, a lawyer, an actress, a singer, something like rich and famous, right? And I never really knew what I wanted to be. And it was actually a struggle for a little while to be like, everybody seems to know what they want, and I don't know what I want, you know. But I used that as an opportunity to explore what was calling out to me. So I would just sign up for introductory courses to things, or I started paying attention to the kinds of books that I was gravitating towards. And then I was like, what's kind of like the common denominator here that gets me excited, that is drawing my attention. And I noticed after a while that it was psychology. I was really interested in what makes people tick. I'm really good at analysis, so like paying attention to patterns and helping to break them. And I thought that really played in very well with psychology and even the work that I do as an executive coach, because I can see kind of between the lines of like what people aren't saying and what keeps coming up for them that maybe they don't see themselves, and be able to bring that to them. So that helps them have more insight. The more insight they have, the more easily they're able to make those changes. So it wasn't something, I don't think many kids grow up and they're like, I want to be a psychologist when I grow up. It was something that evolved, when I was a young adult and I really had to make a decision of like, what am I going to study? And I even remember when I was going to undergrad and I declared my major, my dad said to me, just so you know, if you change your mind and you want to start over with something else, it's okay. So he kind of gave me permission to fail and gave
Yeah.
me permission to change my mind. And it was good to kind of have that in my back pocket, but also I didn't need it. So it felt like I'm in the right space.
Yeah. So who was your inspiration? Who was kind of a heroic force that's allowed you to navigate and finally find exactly where you belong in the professional world?
I can't say it was really any one person in particular. I think it was just living the kind of circumstances that I was fortunate to have, where I didn't have a lot of pressure, like you got to figure this out tomorrow, or you've got to, you know, get a job and drop out of school. It was like, I think when we live in the Western world, we have a lot of freedom to choose things. And I remember how refreshing that felt, especially after, when you grow up and you go to school every day, like pre-college, right? Everything's predetermined for you. You're like, oh, you have to go take science class and math class and English class, and like you have a schedule that somebody else puts you in, and everybody has to do the same thing every day, all the time. And then I was like, I got to college, and I was like, I can choose like anything I want. It was so refreshing. So I think it was just like I love learning and I love exploring, and I found it really refreshing, and I was like, this is play, right? I'm just gonna like find some stuff that sounds interesting and exciting, and I'm gonna go with it, and then let's see where I land. And I think that's something that maybe we're overlooking as a society, but we have so much opportunity, and I wasn't taking it for granted.
So, if you could meet one person alive on the planet that embodies that idea of loving their work, showing the world in the positive way that they can take care of their business and their personal life, just an inspirational force that's out there, who would you love to meet and talk to? And that might help you on your journey.
Uh, there's so many incredible people out there, and I feel like they all have something different to offer. But I think ultimately, somebody who has the right balance of success and lifestyle, that's really something that is valuable for me, I've always tried to have a balance. It's been a driving force, right? It's like, how can I have the thing that I want, whether it's like a degree or a family or a job, whatever it is, and have everything kind of fit into this one plate, that we carry, without too much sacrifice. And I think so far what I found is I can do a decent job here and there. I would love to meet somebody who was able to maybe take it even a notch or two further, where they're like, let's explode, but like still not lose the balance. And I'm not really sure who that might be, but that's kind of what comes to mind for me is
Yeah.
I want to keep the balance, but I also want to have like a bigger explosion,
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain that,
No, I
but
get it. I totally get it. So I'm curious, when you break down your life as a therapist, there's a part of people that may not know when they need therapy. They've gone
yeah,
through trauma, they've gone through things. Burnout seems to be the same kind of thing. They're so inside the peanut butter jar, they can't see the label. And
yeah.
they're so in this world of running. In your estimation, in both of those worlds, navigating it, what's a telltale sign for people to avert that from happening?
Well, actually, that's one of the things I noticed when I started speaking up about burnout is it started really with my clients. I kind of use them as guinea pigs. They would come in and they would start telling me about all the things that are stressing them out. And having studied burnout and understanding what it actually is finally, I would say to them, it sounds like you're burned out. And it was like this light bulb moment where all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, it's like giving a name to the thing that you're experiencing is a game changer for people because and that's really what we do in psychology anyway, right? Is we have a diagnostic manual. So if you come in and you give me all your symptoms, I'm like, okay, well, you're clinically depressed. Now we have a label for it, and the only purpose for that label is so that we know how to treat it,
Yeah.
right? We have to identify what the problem is. And so people are walking around all day long feeling burned out and not even knowing that that's what's going on for them. So the first thing I was doing by going out and speaking on podcasts like this is to just even let people know what burnout is. So if you're experiencing it, you can identify it. And to your point, the number one symptom that people experience is just utter exhaustion. And it's a different kind of exhaustion than if you just ran a marathon and you're physically wasted. It's more a mental or emotional exhaustion where you just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
You're just kind of lagging and you're like, there's something wrong with me. Don't really understand what's going on, but I'm so tired. Like I can't focus. I have this like brain fog. That is a primary symptom of burnout. And so for people who really don't know what burnout is all about, they might mistake that to be maybe I have some sort of illness, maybe I'm just having sleep problems. Like they kind of try to make sense of it, but they don't know.
Yeah.
And so really my one of my goals is really to just go out there and make people aware of what burnout looks like and feels like so they can identify it. So that's really a primary symptom. I would say another one is a change in attitude. So notice that when you are in that state of burnout. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but sometimes you'll notice that in that state, your attitude changes for the negative. So you become more cynical and you might notice the things that are coming out of your mouth are kind of negative compared to the usual. So it might be a job that you always loved and all of a sudden it's just like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Anytime somebody says something to you, you're like, I don't know if I trust that person. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course they're saying that, you
Yeah.
know. And I saw this in one of my coaching clients. She came to me and she was absolutely convinced that whatever was going on wasn't really her. It was everybody else's fault. It was her job, it was her boss, it was her industry that was the problem. And when I explained to her some of the work that we do, when we're coaching is working on mindset. She was like, "What do you mean? I have to do work on my mindset when they're the problem?" So that's the cynicism.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight, ran into an 18-year-old version of you, and you had a book in your hand, like a big coffee table book, and it
Mhm.
was the life that you've lived so far, and you handed it to that young version and said, "This is how your life has turned out so far," would that young version of you believe it?
That's such a hard question. I don't think so
Right.
because what 18-year-old is going to be like, "You did what?"
Yeah. Right.
Like, are you sure that's your life? Like, that doesn't even sound like you.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is like in hindsight, you can say all kinds of things, but if somebody hands you that book and says this is your future, I think that's just confusing. It's like, how do you even get there? And I think the reason for that is because you're giving a picture of the end of the movie, but you're skipping all the steps that helped get you there. And so it's hard to believe that you get to that end without actually experiencing each of those steps. It's kind of like when you live with somebody and you don't notice them either gaining weight or losing weight or getting older or whatever the case may be. And then you have an out of town guest come and they're like, "Oh my God, you lost so much weight. What have you been doing?" And then you ask their spouse and they're like, "I haven't really noticed. I live with this person every day."
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
like you kind of need to
Yeah.
see the steps. So yeah, I probably not.
Would you give any advice?
Oh, you always give advice, right?
Right.
Because that's what we do. We're in the helping field.
Yeah.
Um, to my 18-year-old self, yeah, I mean, I think when I was 18, I was really young and inexperienced and naive and confused. I didn't really have a direction, and I was still trying to figure out who I was and so many things. And so, yeah, I would definitely want to give myself more confidence and let myself know that even if you don't know something, it'll eventually come to you.
Yeah.
So don't stress and trust yourself. And that's something that I tell all my clients. I'm like, I've got a lot of really anxious people that I work with, and they're always planning, they're always doing contingency plans. Well, if this doesn't happen, then I'll do this. And what about this? And, they're always in their head overthinking everything. And I say to them, that's great. But what would be even better is if you just learned to trust yourself. And
Yeah.
then whatever happens, you just figure it out. You
Yeah.
don't have to plan for everything, right?
Yeah.
So to get to the point where you have that sort of relationship with yourself is really powerful. And it's empowering to not have to then worry about everything and just know, I got this.
So to sum up the book that you handed over, if you looked at your life and thought about everything that's happened, all the evolution, everything you've been through, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
I would say my kids,
Yeah.
like starting my family, you start from nothing. You
Yeah.
have like absolutely nothing, and then you bring humans into the world, and then you've got to shape them, and you've got to nurture them, and you've got to educate them. And I'm really proud of the work that I've done as a parent. And when I see them and the humans that they've turned into, it makes me prouder than anything else.
So if you walked into a room of everybody that's known you in a professional sense throughout your career, and you walk to a podium and you can tell them one fun story about you, maybe the first concert you went to, jumping out of an airplane, a wonderful place you traveled to, something fun in your life that would humanize you a little bit to that group, what would be a fun story you would tell that room?
So the story would be 2008. I finally graduated from my doctoral program, and we were living in New York at the time. And I said to my husband, I really want to go traveling for an extensive period of time. And it's now or retirement. Because once we have kids, you're not going to be able to do this. And so we put all our stuff into storage and we went traveling for like 6 months. And it was an amazing, amazing experience. And I can't wait now that I'm like many years into this. I can't wait till I retire and then I can have, the second chapter of that
Yeah.
travel. It was like so fun.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I would say, at least I try to be a compassionate human being that can look at someone and see their humanity above and beyond everything that they are putting out there. And that's part of the reason why I studied psychology, because I'm really fascinated by people and I want to understand what makes them tick. So even when there are people who commit crimes and they do awful things, I'm always thinking, how did they get that way? Right? Um, and I want to just help people live their best life. And so for me, I think the one thing that comes forward as you ask that question is really compassion and empathy and wanting to make this world a better place for everybody.
So for those that want to do that, how can they get the book, podcasts, speaking, hire you, questions, any other good business? Where do they go?
Simplest thing is my website, drsharongrossman.com. My books are on Amazon. I've got my burnout book is the Burnout Solution, and um, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the only social media that I engage with, so you can find me there. It's
Okay.
just / Sharon Grossman.
Okay. I will put links in the show notes. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your story. This has been wonderful.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.